Powers, who did you talk to this week on your weekly Gab Fest?
We caught up with Rivals.com recruiting analyst Matt Clare, who covers Texas Tech at RedRaidersports.com. The guy who you need to know if you're a Texas Tech fan and following the recruiting beat. And he has a lot of good things to say about some of the commits in this class.
Here's Powers' conversation with Matt Clare of RedRaidersports.com here on Texas Football Today.
Greg Powers, TexasFootball.com, and I'm joined by Matt Clare, who I consider to be the lead analyst on the Texas Tech recruiting beat. Matt, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Looking at this recruiting class for Texas Tech, see 8 commitments in it so far. So kind of just give us the big picture. What's it like covering the beat this year on recruiting and covering the beat in general underneath of head coach Matt Wells?
Yeah, I would say covering the beat lately. I mean, I tell folks between the transfer portal and NLI, I mean, college football and the rules around it and this whole little ecosphere that you and I have lived in for a while has just changed so dramatically. And the biggest proof of that is I was looking at it, and last year the coaches took 11 high school commitments and 11 transfers. And so that was your quote unquote balance. And then this year they're at 8 commitments. They just added one last night, but you would think that, you know, it's easy for us to, especially in recruiting, we can cover Texas or Alabama or some of these other, you know, name brand programs, and they land 4 or 5 star or, you know, 3-star guys with 30 offers, whatever it may be. It's easy for us in our seat to say, hey, you know, put our stamp on that. That guy's going to be successful. I think what's interesting to me as this is all folded out post-COVID is, you know, how do these regional programs like a Tech, a TCU, a Baylor, you know, certainly the focus is the state of Texas, but now you're getting kids, you know, they just added a young man who's originally from Stafford out of Houston, went to Virginia Tech for a year and wanted to come back home, you know, closer to home, if you will. It's not like Lubbock's right down the street from Houston, but, you know, you start to see it like that, where you sort of weigh the value of a high school take, if you will, versus, you know, a kid like that can come in with really 4 years of eligibility. And so you kind of weigh that against what's available to you. You know, maybe out of those guys that I mentioned, you're going to offer the 4 or 5-star guys. You know, whether you get them or not is another conversation, and certainly a lot of variables to that. But I mean, hopefully that's a long, winding road to tell you it's definitely changed. But you know, in terms of the 2022 class and Matt Wells, you know, his main thing, especially over the past 2 years, is they wanted to get older and they wanted more experience, and so that's where you see that split of the transfer portal as well as the high school football. Because eventually, you know, I'm sure in a perfect world, they'd like to win more games and depend on, you know, one or the other a little bit less, but leave their options open. So it's, I don't know, like I said off the top, it's just ever changing, Greg.
You mentioned the new recruit, Ben Roberts, Hazlitt Eaton, you know, 6'3", 210 pounds. He's kind of that hybrid guy to me in between safety and outside linebacker. What were your impressions of that commitment?
You know, it's just really interesting. I mean, to me, like I said, for all the reasons earlier, 2022 is so interesting. I mean, this is a young man that doesn't have an evaluation on our site, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, you know, you can't see every player and certainly can't make an evaluation off of one stop. But, you know, I think that there's been the coaching staff at Eaton has done a great job of getting the kids' names out there, getting them recruited. You know, Ben has excellent grades, offers from service academies, some you know, non-Power 5 offers, but definitely, you know, a lot of interest in the region. And at 6'3", 210, you know, they can get a hold of him and add some weight to him. But when you put on the tape, I mean, they're moving him all around the defense, and he's just simply making plays. I think he made a game-winning touchdown catch a week or so ago as well. Just very athletic. And the reason I say I like covering 2022 and my explanation from earlier is that, you know, kids hadn't been able to visit. All they were doing were Zooms like this. And so the coaches hosted, I want to say 3 to 4 different camps in Lubbock. And Ben was one of these kids, as well as another commit, that just drove to Lubbock, took the invitation to come and compete, really stood out. And the coaches said, hey, we're going to watch your film as a group tonight. And then from there, another unofficial visit invite. And his main theme throughout our conversation was he just trusted the coaches. And so, you know, for that, I think, when we talk about the transfer portal, all the changes, all of that, at the end of the day, Greg, you know this, covering his recruiting even longer than I have. Coaches have to trust their evaluations. regardless of what it says on our website or podcast or whatever else. And I think this is a case of that, where they really like the player. They got to know him, they vetted everything out and they saw him as a take. So again, I know we have him listed at safety, but they're going to take him as a hybrid linebacker. So maybe some inside, outside, move him around. Different programs call it different things, but the jack linebacker, whatever we want to call it.
I think the guy that you're referring to, who also came out and punched his ticket and got an offer to come play at Texas Tech, is Gunner's Hut Graham. Of course, he's a tremendous quarterback for them. Probably going to get looked at to play some defense once he arrives on the college scene, but definitely a versatile player and plays for one of, the best high school teams in Texas football. So if you have a chance to go out and watch Gunner, Hut Graham is a guy that's really going to step out. I feel cheated a little bit. I thought I was going to get a chance to watch him at the state 7-on-7. He had some other obligations, wasn't able to be there, so I was super bummed about that. But definitely exciting pickup, I think, for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the first time I saw Hut was actually last year in the 3A state championship. And we were there specifically to see Baron Morton, for obvious reasons. Yep. Texas Tech quarterback commit, 4-star, Elite 11, all of that. And we had waited all season to see him. And I got to say, and I've said it on many, podcasts, I mean, Hut Graham was the best player on the field that night from like a team and a game perspective. I mean, the most athletic, making plays, just all over the field. And that's why we have him labeled as an athlete. Usually we see these guys, especially in the lower levels, maybe that are the best athlete. They're running the offense, they're playing quarterback. But really, if you turn on the tape and you get to see him in person, I think you see the length and you see the possibilities of him. I mean, the hips and everything are there to play corner. And he's going to do that as well as some safety. And I know that that's what he does for Gunter currently, but the coaches see him developing into either a free safety or corner. And, again, I think those attributes of being the quarterback, running the offense, being the leader, someone that guys look up to, that's going to pay dividends as he kind of goes into his college career. And again, I agree with you. I mean, I thought, between seeing him at that game and being impressed, even at that point in time, I really doubt he had more than maybe one offer, if any. And then fast forward to him camping at Tech and getting offered. I called my coworker and I was like, that's the kid from the championship game, right? And so it just kind of crazy how all that came together. And he was actually one of the first commitments in this class for Tech.
It's a lot of fun seeing guys go out there and earn their offer. You see these offers stack up for certain recruits, and some guys get 20 or 30 offers, and it seems to happen overnight. But it's refreshing sometimes in a way to see Ben Roberts and a Hut Graham go out there and work hard for a goal and then to achieve that goal. And I think inherently, when those guys get on the team, they play above their ranking because they still have that desire to be good and earn their spot on the roster. So those are two guys I'm definitely watching. I'm really curious, Matt, is there a guy out there? I specifically cover Texas. I see that Texas Tech has some out-of-state commitments on that list. Is there one of those names that Texas Tech fans really need to know about and should be keeping a close eye on?
I mean, I'll just mention two guys. One, because it's a really cool story. The other, because it just kind of jumps off the page from a ranking standpoint. Marion Horn is another athlete out of Broken Arrow High School in Oklahoma. He's in our Rivals 250, so one of the top 250 prospects, in the nation. Regardless, high honor, 4-star kid. And I guess that interpretation, a lot of people see that as a, quote unquote, good thing when they see recruiting rankings. The way we look at that is that's an impact player, somebody that has all conference potential, NFL, draft potential. And so he comes in, he's going to be another guy that plays defensive back. But if you look at his tape and what he does for Broken Arrow, they also have Robert Spears Jennings on the team. That's an Oklahoma wide receiver commit. So he's on the outside. They've got Horn running this sort of, halfback / slot receiver type of deal with jet sweeps and all sorts of creative ways to get him the ball. So just really jumps off on the tape with his speed. And I think he'll translate to an excellent defensive back in the Big 12, where they just, they really spread it out and throw the ball around a lot. That's the obvious one. Like I said, I did want to highlight Jocelyn Malaska out of Bethany, Oklahoma. Another kid just like Ben and just like Hut that camped at Texas Tech. He camped at a lot of places. I mean, I don't have the story in front of me, but at least 8 to 9 camps at Power 5 or regional universities. And, this is a kid that came over from, I believe, I don't want to get this wrong. I hope I don't, but it's Haiti. And as him and his brothers were adopted, and he's been in the States for 6 or 7 years. And, his commitment video like almost brought me to tears, because it was his mom talking about how he could like barely speak English and was falling behind in class. And all of a sudden, they work with him and they turned it around, and he really gravitates towards football. Well, here the kid works. You talk about working hard. I mean, he comes over from a different country and comes into our culture. And yes, it's not Texas, but it's somewhat similar with Oklahoma. And just to see that progression and to see him get a Power 5 scholarship opportunity like that, pretty excellent. Great young man. I mean, we couldn't talk because he was like working his summer construction job laying concrete. So just like checks a lot of boxes for just a lunch pail guy that comes in and works.
That's a pretty cool story. And for those that don't know, I believe even Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, is the biggest high school in Oklahoma. I think that's a true fact. And then you have Bethany, Oklahoma, which is a really small
Right.
town in Oklahoma. So Matt Wells, who used to coach at Tulsa, I think he was the recruiting coordinator there, dipping back into some of his Oklahoma ties to pull in some talent. I know it's hard to like pinpoint it down because of the transfer portal nowadays, but do you foresee some more additions in this class? I'm not trying to pinpoint any names or anything like that, but can you give us an idea of maybe what the numbers may look like? Or are there still some takes out there for Texas Tech?
I think as we record this in mid-September, there's 3 months left to that early signing period. I think anything could change, but as they stand at 8, I feel very confident about 9 or 10 as a number, and then something very similar to like I described earlier with supplementing that with the transfer portal. I think again, it's not a knock. I mean, we're still kind of figuring this out ourselves as longtime recruiting analysts. But if you can get kids like that had the 30, 40 offers, or maybe they were that, Rivals 250 kid and it wasn't a fit at Alabama, or it wasn't a fit, wherever else. They've done a lot of that. I mean, they have Eric Monroe from LSU who, maybe he didn't crack the LSU defensive back depth chart. That's not an indictment on a kid as a football player, right? And so he's been able to come in for the past 2 years and be a starter and a leader on this defense. And so again, 9 or 10, I would say, I will give you a few names just because, it has been a short list. But Major Everhart's a quote unquote major target for Texas Tech. When Matt Wells came in, he talked about how important it was to, certainly some of these kids from West Texas are going to go elsewhere or want to move away from home, but, making sure that they try to land as many of those kids as possible and grow from the region. And, out of Amarillo, Tascosa, we've seen a lot of talent. I believe King Daru is at Purdue now, getting into the end zone and making a name for himself. I think Major is that same type of do-it-all back, but I see his future in college at the receiver position. And so, he's had an interesting recruitment. We all knew he was very fast. We've seen the track times, we've seen the videos, and all that really kind of went viral or got popular in the offseason. Well, then all of the offers came. He's at 19 total offers now. Tech was his first Power 5 offer. The relationship is there, but Notre Dame has come in. Multiple other, national programs have come in. I know he's going to take an official visit there, but he's been to Tech several times. And, if there's any remaining sort of big target out there, it's going to be Major Everhart. And then, there's guys that maybe have committed elsewhere that they've had for official visits. Like you look, I mean, this is really speculation. I'm not quoting a kid or anything, but you look at like Florida State and what's going on and how, we cover the state and kids commit and then maybe rethink that, as the season goes along. You look at the big offensive lineman, Jalen Early out of Duncanville. The coaches had him on campus. He mentioned to our national team that he remains in weekly contact with the coaching staff. So, things change in those 3 months. I know that there's guys like that. I just use that as an example that they would take if, things changes or if things change there. But, for the most part, they're going to, again, going back to trusting their evaluations, they're going to take a Ben Roberts if they put in the time and they truly go through that recruiting process. I don't think out of the, over hundreds of offers that they had, I don't think there's many kids above and beyond that, Greg, that they're truly talking with or thinking about adding to the class right now. I think the rest will come from the transfer portal.
The transfer portal has definitely changed things. It's just something that we have to be aware of. I do at times feel like it's very unfortunate for some of the kids in the current recruiting class or the younger recruiting classes as, colleges try to figure out the right way to approach the transfer portal with having to, weigh it out with what high school kids they should mix in. But I think that everybody is under the impression or the understanding that there's going to be some balance there. You got to be able to take some guys now
Sure.
who can come in and play right away. And you can even look at some of the bigger schools, that have done this, that have competed for national championships. So if you want to compete, I think year in, year out, you have to be able to bring in some of those impact guys that are going to have immediate effect when they step on the field. So, I do think it's important. But Major Everhart, man, he is a speed demon. That's one I'm really proud of. We've had him in the TCTF Hot 100 since, I think, the second re-ranking of it. So got a little bit ahead of the game on that one. And you touched on his speed. That was what really grabbed my eye when I was breaking down his tape. And it was pretty exciting to see his rise as some of these schools, especially in state like Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor all stepped up and are now trying to woo him to their campuses. That's Matt Clare, RedRaidersports.com, man. Thanks for the time. If you want to follow him, it's at Matt Clare Rivals. Writes about some of the best stories out there on Texas Tech and covering recruiting, and you guys should check out his site and give him a follow.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, man. Thanks for joining me.
There is Matt Clare from RedRaidersports.com. Thanks for his time talking with our own Greg Powers. Good interview, GP.
Thank you. It's an interesting time to be a Red Raiders fan, too, because they have a diversified outlook on the recruiting process, recruiting in Texas, recruiting some of the other states this year. But they also hit the transfer portal really hard. So to keep up with all that, you have to stay dialed in with a guy like Matt.
Exactly right.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to TexasFootball.com/subscribe.